Historic Resources Commission of the City of Albany. We certainly welcome everyone here this evening and anyone viewing on YouTube. In attendance this evening, myself, John Myers, the chair, Commissioner McEnany, Commissioner Garrity, Commissioner Kaplan. Okay. Jason Thomas is our legal counsel. Christopher Roman is our historic preservation planner, and Aaron Glennon is the deputy planning director, keeping us all on track. I do declare we have a quorum. Our meeting consists of one public meeting item and then three public hearing agenda items. If there are any comments, we just request that those comments be kept to the matter under the jurisdiction of the HRC and that they be held to 3 minutes in duration in the interest of everyone's time. With that, I think we can get started with the meeting. The first item on the agenda is a public meeting item, and it's a reconnaissance level survey of the Pine Hills Neighborhood Historic Resources Survey. It's a particularly exciting thing because it is a presentation of one of the areas that was recommended in the historic or in the preservation plan that was created a few years ago for the city of Albany. And we're always excited to see expansion of and recognition of historic resources in our historic city. So who is here to present or online to present?
So this evening we're joined by Siri Olson and Frankie Evans from Easton Architects. They were just right now.
Okay.
They were engaged by the city at the end of 2024, beginning of 2025 to conduct the survey. So I'm going to hand it over to Siri and Frankie to go through the presentation. We'll have a period at the end of the presentation for questions. So if anything does come up, if you just hold your questions till the end. But Siri, I'll turn it over to you. You have the ability to also share screens.
Great, thank you so much, Erin. So I think we'll go ahead and share our presentation, which we're very excited to be here virtually with you all this evening. Thank you so much for inviting us to join your meeting, allowing us to be virtual. We're very happy to be here. And you've set us up beautifully for many of the continuations of survey planning and themes that we found from our project. So I think, Frankie, are you able to pull up the presentation?
No, I did just send a request, but
okay.
Aaron, okay, that's fine.
We're having
only one of them is frozen. Looks like the other's moving a bit in the corner. No.
Okay. Siri and Frankie, if you can hear me, I'm just going to close Zoom out real quick and then turn it back on. We're having some issues.
Sure, thank you.
Sure.
you should be good to go. I think.
Okay. Can you all see the presentation?
Bill, hold.
We
2
hear
seconds.
you.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
Okay.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Once again, thank you for allowing us to cause you some technical difficulties. So just to reintroduce ourselves, I'm Siri Olson. I'm the Director of Preservation Policy and Planning at Easton Architects. And Frankie, you can introduce yourself.
My name is Francesca or Frankie, and I'm the Cultural Resource Specialist at Easton Architects.
And so we were very honored to be invited and able to prepare this survey for you all. And so during the preparation of this Pine Hills neighborhood reconnaissance level survey, we worked with Aaron and Christopher and Brad from the Department of Planning and Development. We were very grateful for their assistance and review and contributions throughout the project. And also as part of the project team, we worked with a project reviewer at the State Historic Preservation Office who gave their guidance and requests for some of the reconnaissance level survey, reviewed the report and findings, and offered their requests for what sets up future preservation level efforts. And as a part of this project, we also presented the findings to the Pine Hills Neighborhood Association. We had a meeting with them just about a month ago and had a very wonderful and productive discussion there. So tonight, we'll want to give you a brief overview of how we collected the information, so some of the methodological items and findings that we shared with the Neighborhood Association. We know you're well versed in survey planning and how that all comes together. And we'll focus on our recommendations and how we collected that information and what we found and recommended for future study. And we will welcome any questions as well at the end of the presentation.
Oops, sorry. So as Siri said, one of our last month we had a meeting with the Pine Hills Neighborhood Association. So some of what we go over in this report or in this presentation might be things that you already know, but we also wanted to provide you with sort of a similar presentation that we gave to the Pine Hills Neighborhood Association or the people who came to the meeting, so that you could understand the conversations and the things that we discussed with them. So in speaking with the Pine Hills Neighborhood Association about the project scope, we wanted to highlight the differences between reconnaissance and intensive level survey, mostly so that residents would have an understanding of the different types of deliverables that result from each. So our main emphasis to them was that the purpose of reconnaissance surveys is to gain a better understanding of broader trends and patterns within a survey area as opposed to intensive level surveys, which, as you know, have more building specific data and more data recordation and evaluation. We also noted that intensive level surveys, rather than reconnaissance level surveys, are where eligibility determinations and recommendations are made for listing on the state and national registers.
Right. So as we were already kind of introduced, we began this project with a survey area that originated in the 2019 Historic Preservation Plan. And one thing that is striking from the get-go is this is a very large area of the city. It was one of the largest areas identified in the preservation plan. So the origin of the boundary was really established and informed by community engagement and the process of preparing the preservation plan. And so from this map, it was refined further into a study area map developed by the Department of Planning and Development. So this narrowly defined our survey area, and the historic resources within this boundary were the primary focus of our work. However, part of our reconnaissance level work is to really examine the survey area boundaries, and it can result in recommendations to increase or decrease or expand due to the findings, particularly the architectural character found throughout. So due to the large size of the survey area and the distribution variety of the building typologies and the many different styles, several smaller districts within the survey area were recommended for future intensive level survey. And our research on the development of Pine Hills as a neighborhood indicates a likely expansion for future work on the western and northwestern boundaries of this survey area shown. And that additional research is needed in order to really confirm the exact extents of any boundary extension. So we'll be talking a lot about boundaries and where there are preliminary boundaries and how they set up future work. We'll be talking about that throughout the presentation.
So in terms of our project methodology, it consisted of field work. So we walked the neighborhood on foot, and then we conducted a windshield survey for the few parts that we didn't get to. So during survey, our focus was, as we said, to gain a broad understanding of architectural trends and patterns within the area, and also to identify any clusters of buildings or sub-areas that we would recommend for future intensive level survey. We also conducted research prior to and following our fieldwork. Our research avenues included, but were not limited to, looking at sandbar maps and atlas maps, historic aerial photographs, city directories, historic newspapers, books and publications, and tax assessment data. We also utilized the New York SHPO's Cultural Resource Information System, also known as CRIS, database to learn about and record previous determinations of eligibility for buildings and districts within the survey area and any buildings or districts that were listed in the state and national registers. So in our discussion of historic context and associated property types during the Pine Hills Neighborhood Association meeting, we highlighted the gradual development of the Pine Hills neighborhood. So we really emphasized that although the Albany Land Improvement and Building Company initially subdivided the land in 1888, the neighborhood wasn't fully built out until the 1960s. And this is really, you can really tell in the built environment of the survey area. So during our fieldwork, we found that the survey area contains a wide variety of building types and architectural styles that are largely due to the many individuals and organizations who played a role in the neighborhood's development. So their efforts ended up creating pockets of what we called architectural cohesion, resulting from the construction of both speculative housing and then the establishment of smaller subdivisions. So during the meeting, we emphasized the visual impacts of these different developers by highlighting Hanson and Woodlawn Avenue specifically, looking at the Winchester Gables development. So if you've been there, you know that the Spanish eclectic houses in Winchester Gables are very different from buildings to the east on the same street, which are mid-century brick dwellings. So within the survey area, we also observed that building styles and forms on a street were often representative of its period of development. So during the neighborhood association meeting, we noted that one of these streets, Providence Street between South Lake Avenue and Quail Street, is a really good example of this pattern, as the forms and styles present are representative of early 20th century construction. We then summarized for the meeting attendees the common forms and styles found within the survey area, which are all listed on the slide. So we use the next two slides to demonstrate the purpose of reconnaissance level surveys, namely understanding broad trends and patterns within the survey area, including building typologies. So we're not going to go through all of them with you, but we noted to the attendees where these different building types were found within the survey area, particularly if they were found within multiple areas or multiple sections. We also noted that both vernacular and high style examples of these building types exist. We discussed examples of high style buildings that could be classified into identified typologies and where buildings featured some decorative elements. Ooh. Skipping very far ahead. So then we briefly discussed setting and building use within the survey area, emphasizing the visual impacts that the covenants restricting land use or specifying minimum cost required to construct a dwelling can have on a neighborhood. We also noted how the presence of specific institutions, namely SUNY Albany and the College of St. Rose, shaped, at least in part, multifamily housing in the Pine Hills neighborhood.
So from all of this fieldwork and the historic context analysis, we arrived at our recommendations for future study. So these really fell into two categories, which we'll talk about. Between distinct areas recommended and then some themes and topics for future study. So to start out, we recommended 8 specific areas for future intensive level survey. Now these areas possess a connection to neighborhood themes, and are typically architecturally distinct. So these were particularly areas for which we were able to recommend preliminary boundaries without the in-depth research that would occur during an intensive level survey. Excuse me. And this was especially true for areas that have potential significance under National Register Criterion C for architecture, since the boundaries were, for the most part, already evident in the built environment itself, such as these Spanish eclectic residences in Winchester Gables. So even with districts that were potentially significant under Criterion A for themes such as community planning and development or religion, 2 of the 3 clusters that we noted were located on a campus or an already self-contained area. So those boundaries really became evident from the built environment, namely the College of St. Rose and the diocese around North Main, the North Main Avenue complex. So we also want to reiterate here that the boundaries that were recommended in our report and in the map that's shown here are intended to serve as a guide for a future intensive level survey. And justified boundaries were really a key request that came from SHPO. And their request was really to provide a targeted point of entry for future in-depth research. So it was really important to us to acknowledge that these boundaries are a starting point. There's something that we're able to really identify from the physical material, and that can be expanded based on the more in-depth research. And to that same idea of future flexibility, contributing and non-contributing status for individual properties was assigned by us in our property list, which is appended to our survey report. And this was also at the request of SHPO. But these contributing, non-contributing statuses can absolutely be confirmed and changed during that intensive level survey process, especially for districts that can be recommended as eligible under Criterion A. So these 8 areas are really these kind of set up future stepping stones, and they do not preclude future identification of other significant nodes within the survey area. So a particular consideration was really given to the survey area's northwest boundary. So this was the area around the original Pine Hills subdivision. And our fieldwork and research indicated that it's extended farther west and north to South Manning Boulevard and Marion Avenue. So as we'll discuss in a little bit, this area is not indicated here in our kind of categories of specific areas for intensive level survey as a district, because more in-depth research is needed to establish those justified boundaries. So these 8 that we were going to discuss and we'll review throughout have these preliminary but informed boundaries and preliminary potentials, statements of significance. But we do want to discuss that the role of the boundary as being a starting point. And one significant finding for us as well was really that the neighborhood is sort of known for its residential character, mostly with single family housing. But as we looked more in depth and certainly throughout this large area, it really has a mixture that is significant of different types of residences and different religious and civic buildings and educational buildings all throughout. So there really is a dynamic and varied architectural character throughout the neighborhood that led to this smaller targeted set of findings rather than one single finding for one large Pine Hills recommended historic district.
Okay, so in our survey report, we have both these identified recommended districts, and then we also have identified additional themes and topics that we recommend for future study. So those are going to be woven sort of throughout the next few slides while we talk about districts. As many of our identified districts connect to one or more of our identified topics or themes for future research. So as Siri mentioned before, subdivisions is one of the themes that we recommend future study on, particularly for the original Pine Hills subdivision. So looking at Marion Avenue, Manning Boulevard, and South Manning Boulevard. And then even just walking down Manning Boulevard and doing some preliminary research on the area, even though it was slightly outside the scope of our survey. It looks like Manning Boulevard is definitely a likely node of interest for future study. So our survey report also recommends additional research into the Pine Hills Park subdivision, which was established by Lorenz Willig and John A. Scott between 1912 and 1915. While this area is technically now part of the Melrose neighborhood, the Pine Hills Park name does merit additional research to determine if the land was once associated with the subdivision laid out by the Albany Land Improvement and Building Company. So research as part of our survey also uncovered a smaller historic neighborhood called Pageville, located within the survey area boundary. The neighborhood is roughly located between Western and Madison Avenues to the north and south, and Quail and Partridge Streets to the east and west. However, because we couldn't identify or confirm really solid boundaries, we recommended this as a future topic for study rather than trying to define the district ourselves with the amount of research that we can do within, the scope of a reconnaissance level survey. So for our identified districts, the first that we identified was Winchester Gables. That is a district that is potentially significant under criterion A in the area of community planning and development, and also under criterion C for its architecture. So the district possesses one of the largest, if not the largest, concentration of Spanish eclectic houses in Albany. And the buildings are also, in addition, representative of an early 20th century building typology, which is centered around the automobile, which is visible in the incorporation of the garage into the massing of each house. So our survey report recommends intensive level survey to further refine the period of significance, noted as possibly encompassing 1928 to 1935, and also in identifying the original boundaries of the development, which Winchester had originally planned to have 60 dwellings. And the fact that only 27 were built was possibly due to the onset of the Great Depression. So Winchester Villas is a second district that we identified as potentially eligible under criterion A within the area of community planning and development. So this area is representative of the role of developers in the Pine Hills neighborhood in the establishment of planned subdivisions and the westward expansion of Albany. The proposed district boundary encompasses the original planned extents of the development, and the 6 buildings within this area were constructed in both the Colonial Revival and Tudor Revival styles. What should be noted is that this district is also within the Helderberg Heights subdivision, which I'll talk about next. An intensive level survey was recommended to help establish a statement of significance for this area and possible incorporation of the Winchester Villas and Helderberg Heights areas into one district. So the Helderberg Heights district was determined potentially significant under criterion C in the area of architecture. This area in particular possesses a high concentration of Tudor Revival style dwellings and is notable for its landscape street, which features a parkway. All 39 dwellings within this area were constructed by 1935, and the overlap with Winchester Villas is yet unknown. The survey report recommends future intensive level survey to understand the timeline of development and also to inform the boundaries of the district. As I said just before, additional research may result in the creation of one large district encompassing both Winchester Villas and Helderberg Heights. The next district that we identified was of rough face stone and concrete houses, which was potentially significant under criterion C in the area of architecture. The area consists of 8 rough face stone and pressed concrete dwellings on North Pine Avenue and Lancaster Street. We know at least 4 of the buildings are connected or were constructed by the Albany Material and Construction Company. Future intensive level survey is recommended to further define the period of significance and to identify further connections with the Albany Material and Construction Company. So the following theme connects to the previously discussed districts. The individuals and organizations listed on the slide, in addition to others noted in our survey report, had a visual impact on the neighborhood and were responsible for creating as I said before, clusters of architectural cohesion, while also contributing to the growth of building stock within the neighborhood. So each individual or organization's connection with specific buildings or areas of the neighborhood is largely unknown, particularly as there is no real obvious difference, at least visually, between an architect designed house and a developer or builder designed dwelling. Knowledge of who built up which sections of the neighborhood may reveal more about the pattern of construction within the survey area and also aid in the determination of additional research or additional areas for future survey. Another district that we identified contains 3 apartment buildings that are potentially significant under criterion C in the area of architecture. These buildings are notable within the survey area for the patterned brickwork that is incorporated into their design. Future intensive level survey is recommended for these buildings, which serve as a representative example of a 1920s or 1930s residential building typology within the Pine Hills neighborhood. Future survey would act as a starting point for a thematic study of apartment buildings within Pine Hills. So the next bullet on the slide is, you can see we recommended future study of a theme or a thematic study of apartment buildings. So as a theme, the survey area contains many clusters of apartment buildings, most of which were constructed during the mid-20th century. The survey report recommends future study to evaluate apartment buildings within the survey area as a theme or building subtype. And as previously noted, an intensive level survey of the brick pattern apartment buildings on South Allen Street can act as a starting point for additional study of this theme, but it's not the end all be all. So other apartment buildings can be surveyed, but these 3 buildings will act as a good starting point for that research. So another district we identified were brick row houses on Hudson Avenue. These buildings are potentially significant under criterion C for architecture as one of the few groupings of row houses in the survey area and as some of the earliest constructed buildings in Pine Hills. Future intensive level survey is recommended to evaluate the connection of these buildings to other adjacent row houses, both on Quayle Street and also in nearby designated historic districts, which have larger amounts of row houses. So during the Pine Hills Neighborhood Association meeting, community members also indicated the presence of a grouping of wood row houses on North Main Avenue. And someone brought up the question of whether they should have been identified as a district for future intensive level survey. So similar to apartment buildings, we also recommended a thematic study of row houses in our survey report. So the brick row houses identified here can similarly act as a starting point for this research, which would inevitably include the wood row houses on North Main Avenue. But these were specifically selected due to their proximity to the row houses on Quayle Street, which have been determined eligible for listing, and also to the adjacent designated historic districts, which, as I said before, contain a large number of row houses. So the 7th district that we identified were the 3 buildings which comprise what we call the Roman Catholic Diocese North Main Avenue complex. These buildings are potentially significant under criterion A within the area of religion. So we recommended future intensive level survey should focus on religiously founded philanthropic institutions and the role of religious charities in civil and civic life in the Pine Hills neighborhood and within Albany. So future survey should evaluate the buildings within the context of other Catholic and religiously owned or charitable institutions within the survey area. This future study may find a connection to additional religious and also secular institutions in Pine Hills and establish a context for how their presence may have influenced the development of the neighborhood. And then finally, our last district was the College of St. Rose campus. So before I talk about the district significance, during our meeting with the Pine Hills Neighborhood Association, we emphasized that as part of a reconnaissance level survey, we examined the campus within the context of the overall neighborhood's built environment and development. So our primary focus was on how the presence of the college impacted the built environment of the neighborhood. So with that being said, in our survey report, we recommend that the College of St. Rose is potentially significant under criterion A in the area of community planning and development, with education as a secondary theme. So the boundary drawn, as Siri mentioned before, was based on historic campus maps and plaques on buildings. And because of the lack of architectural cohesion, mainly due to the changing of the campus, so the erection of new buildings, the demolition of older buildings for new construction, and also the construction of parking lots, which resulted in the demolition of older historic buildings, um, has led to an area where some buildings aren't clearly connected to the college based on their physical appearance alone. So therefore, in some instances, it was difficult to assign a contributing and a non-contributing status because to do so requires a justifiable boundary, and our justifiable boundary has to be informed by the period of significance, which more in-depth research was needed to determine. So any determination of a period of significance in the future based on additional research should evaluate the integrity of the campus based on the college's need to evolve in response to the growth of the student body, and also its need to evolve to meet the needs of students during its approximately 100 years of operation. So we recommended future intensive level survey for the district to better define a period of significance, and then from that, establish district boundaries, and then from that, confirm contributing and non-contributing status of the buildings. So as Siri said, while we do have sort of preliminary determinations in our table in the appendix of our report, those are by no means permanent and are very likely and subject to change.
And so then we concluded with our discussion and are happy to conclude our presentation tonight with really just outlining how the recommendations of the survey can lead to a number of next steps and future opportunities for preservation. So we really kind of concluded and reviewed with the neighborhood association and are happy to know additional thoughts and questions about how the products of the survey can branch out in many different ways. So one that we really emphasize is that next step of conducting intensive level surveys for identified districts. And that was really a lot of the focus also of our discussions with SHPO during this process, was how do our recommendations fit with areas in the data that they have on file? What are their questions? How would they like to move forward? What they need to be able to recommend and make findings about potential significance, how all of that information can build together. And then another clear next step that is available is to pursue New York State and National Register of Historic Places nominations. And as we are all well aware and really appreciate, the reasons to pursue designation are manifold and cover both the appreciation and public education goals of appreciating historic resources and understanding and protecting what is historic about this neighborhood and about Albany in general, and makes that information available as a public tool and gives property owners and stewards of the built environment access to preservation incentives. So we really are excited about the findings and the recommendations, as they can be foundational stepping stones for all of these next steps and areas of exploration. So thank you so much for your time, and we're welcoming of your questions and anything that we may be able to clarify or hear about your preservation priorities within the Pine Hills neighborhood as well.
Thank you both for a very thorough presentation. I guess I will open it to any of the commission members who have any questions, comments?
I'm surprised because my understanding of Pine Hills is probably more of a neighborhood concentration. And I think there are some exceptions to what I consider as the Pine Hills neighborhood. So, for example, the Pine Hills Development Corporation, which was established in 89 or 90 and started to build houses right around 90. Somehow the philosophy, the no more, I remember the ads, no more saloons in Pine Hills. And you'll notice everything from Allen Street between Madison, actually it's almost Allen Street all the way over to Washington Ave. There are no saloons, and there's no saloons north of that. The intrusions that happen are like very much on the edge. The villas that were advertised all were like 60-some feet wide and so on and so forth. They later on would figure out thin driveways that would sneak in and have a place to park a car. I think of porches. I think of a variety of architecture, some hanging on to Victorian values, others wanting to go to colonial revival and so on. But I see a commonality of developing that area and people wanting to live in that area. And then when I hear, for example, that 4 exceptional buildings that don't relate to anything else in Pine Hills are made of concrete block, and that they should be concentrated on first, they're like the least Pine Hills that I can think of because of that construction. They are an odd area. That was originally the home for the deaf, was where Lancaster went down and cut North Pine Avenue into the 2 blocks. They're relatively developed. And by the time they got into that and they tore down the school for the deaf, which was on the northwest corner, then they were new coming into that area and are less typical of the neighborhood that surrounds it. So I see them being included in something for all of North Pine Avenue, which has a community of history and architecture with the varieties involved. But I don't see where they would be typical Pine Hills. They're almost like I can see Winchester's developments. That's unique in its own right. It's when movie stars became famous and people suddenly decided they wanted Spanish houses in the Northeast. But that one throws me a bit. When I look at the brick houses being taken in Pageville, they're almost more of an extension of the row houses on South Manning, South Lake Avenue, where there are exceptional row houses, and it begins to expand and move up the hill a little bit. And they identify with that area, which is Washington Park, the West Washington Park neighborhood. And yes, they certainly do identify with another attempt at row houses on the west side of Quail Street, again, less than 1 block. And then at that point, people are trying to give up row houses, and they're still putting in wooden houses that are not necessarily villas, but they are falling in love with front porches. You can see the development, but why these would be chosen when the big issue is all of Pine Hills. Partridge Street, its history was overwhelmingly residential, and but because one large extended block was purchased by the College of St. Rose, sort of ignores the neighbors and relatives across the street. In my own family, 94 years, the McEnany's lived across the street from the St. Rose block, or right on that block, 2 houses, one opposite the other. What happened to the neighborhood of Partridge Street? It was discovered by the newcomer being the College of St. Rose, which had confined itself more or less limited on the block, and then went into massive expansion primarily in the 70s and 80s and beyond. is the period of significance the College of St. Rose? Or is it the development of Pine Hills when we suddenly discovered that the trolley car could make it up to Quail Street and opened up a whole new neighborhood? If you look at the dates of the churches in the area, all those churches are long developed before the College of St. Rose is developed. And I'm just wondering, are we taking something that's an exception to the rule and the general character of the residential neighborhood and zeroing in on the exception to the rule, overlooking the significance of Pine Hills as a much larger area?
I think your question touches on exactly some of the discoveries and questions that we looked at and debated through this project. So I think I'll clarify that the smaller exceptional areas are not recommended as a priority over a study of the more typical Pine Hills neighborhood, really as an option, as a complement to the porches and the earlier sort of more northwestern character of the neighborhood as you're describing it, that sort of early transportation oriented residential development, that original Pine Hills neighborhood. So the recommendations made are certainly not in any recommended priority or order of study. And some of the smaller areas could even be combined into a study. But we bring them up as a reflection of the variety within the Pine Hills neighborhood. I think to really what we found as important to highlight from our study is exactly what you voiced, that the covenants from the original development restricted certain commercial uses. There's really this variety of uses in different parts of the broader Pine Hills neighborhood that show up in the concrete houses, the brick houses, the schools, and the education. So from our scope to sort of document and record what is existing and what is out there and what are the points of connection between those exceptional groups and the more typical character, that was really one of our goals. So I hope that can clarify anything about a prioritization. And I will say too that your point about the influence of the original development and the advertisements of the villas is one of the main reasons why we would recommend a study of an intensive level survey, the scope of which is that original planned Pine Hills development. So again, that northwestern section. Because there is not sort of the most clear character between what was advertised and planned or originally envisioned for that area in those villas versus what was actually built. Or
anything, when you say northwestern, basically everything west of Partridge Street is the front porch group.
Yeah. And so I think that's, it's a portion of the study area that certainly merits recognition. There are wonderful houses there. From our perspective and from especially as we were working with SHPO again about this question of boundaries, is that drawing a certain boundary on New Scotland Avenue, Manning, maybe Washington, kind of around that area, was not evident based solely on the architecture. It would mean maybe excluding buildings that should be considered as part of it. And it also meant we would need to justify, for example, if we were using New Scotland Avenue as that boundary, there are houses on the southern western side that would be excluded from that boundary, like they weren't within our survey area, but they are also, for example, intact, good examples of that the Homestead Temple front building typology. So the question would be, oh, well, why aren't they included? And so the same would go for the northern portion. So that's where that element of future study really comes in, is there was, a finding that there's fewer hard lines drawn between the buildings themselves that would say this is the one singular Pine Hills historic district. We're not to say that it doesn't, that it can't exist, but that its center and its boundaries may sort of shift more north and west, that area beyond Partridge Street, as you say. So I think if there's anything I missed in your question, please let me know. And I know we have another question.
This is a bit of a footnote, Jack, to yours, and also the question I started to ask before to fill time.
Yes.
Of what happens next. And so does it feel, Aaron and Chris, to you that the last slide that we saw of next steps, is that what you would have responded with?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you guys had a really clear presentation, and I'll assume that all the backup data is well organized and really nicely done. It's a really large area, and there are probably a dozen or more, however many ways to start to prioritize the different areas within this and how to link them and what we're. But the issue of one of the ways often would be to prioritize within a big survey area would be, do we have areas that are vulnerable? Do we have areas that have potential if using the historic tax credits? And I guess how would we, is it appropriate to ask those questions kind of as an overlay to where these next areas of next level study or further investigation or proceeding go? Because it would seem to me the most obvious, which is probably incorrect as soon as we talked about it, but the most obvious would be to look at the commercial corridors where the financial incentives would be potentially very, very powerful as a planning tool. And the other, of course, would be at the St. Rose campus, but who knows how that fits together? And is that a reason to look in that area? Is it a reason to not look at that area? I don't know. But I guess that's a question, and kind of Aaron and Chris, beyond what Siri and Frankie laid out as to just from a technical perspective, which I think is what you guys provided. What are you two thinking in terms of what happens next?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be something that we would definitely need to have kind of an internal discussion about. I think, Siri and Frankie have kind of teed us up to be able to, which coming out of any reconnaissance plan, that's kind of what we would like to see of, these are areas where, maybe they're not ready for an intensive level, so we need to do further research. But then taking some of those areas that are identified as intensive and thinking about, well, how do we prioritize these so that we can kind of go through and fulfill an intensive and get them either as quickly as possible ready for National Register listing, state National Register listing. So now that we have that report, that does set us up to be able to have kind of more in-depth discussions. Also, from what they've heard at the neighborhood association meeting, I think that has also kind of helped us to be able to round out some of those discussions with what are we seeing, from the neighborhood, what have they identified as maybe some of their priorities, as well as what they would like to see come next.
So that's part of the next.
The next.
Okay.
So But, you know, they've done a very good job as to, you know, we did ask them to look at St. Rose kind of in depth. It came up in multiple discussions because of, you know, what's currently going on there. So I think, you know, what we had heard from the neighborhood, what we just, you know, see happening, we'll have to have further discussions about that. But that's kind of, you know, some of those, what were originally single family properties that were then dorms and offices, you know, the city's already done some work with making some amendments to our permitted use table. So those houses, because they're located in mixed use campus institutional zoning districts, which previously didn't allow for 1, 2, and possibly 3 unit structures, that's now permitted. So, you know, looking at that of opening those properties potentially back up for residential use again. But for survey work, we'll definitely need to start having discussions about prioritizing what, either for the research, for their, you know, intensive level surveys. Jack, to go back to your point, and I think Siri answered this very well, but like with the reconnaissance level survey, those boundaries we could potentially, you know, change and expand and, you know, reduce them. During kind of initial meetings and discussions, we did talk about it because it is such a big area, and in the historic preservation plan, it's that large area because there was so much discussion and back and forth about, well, Pine Hills is identified as this and it's this area, or no, Pine Hills is this area, and there really wasn't kind of a consensus. So we kind of just took feedback from the neighborhood, from historians and everyone else, you know, other research and stuff, and decided and set a very, very large boundary, knowing that
Of a study area.
setting
Of
a
the
study
study
area, so that it might not actually, maybe doesn't fully encompass Pine Hills, maybe it needs to be manipulated a little bit, maybe Pine Hills is fully in there, so it definitely is, you know, being that this is a reconnaissance level survey, it's not the end all be all, there's going to be a lot of work after this.
So the title Pine Hills is a bit problematic because it's amorphous. I don't think we know what it is
It's
yet.
like the south end of Albany.
Right.
Nobody can agree.
Right.
And how did it come to be called? How did it come to be called rather than say a midtown or a midtown? How did it come to be called? Was it the neighborhood association that took a primary lead?
It could have, I don't know if anything came up in research, but I mean, it could have been, but Gary, Frankie, I don't know, did you find anything outside of like where Pine Hill came from?
I don't think that's the question.
No? Okay.
It's close to my question. The question
Sorry.
is, we have a big area that was identified,
Right.
and we have and that's what these folks did their work in. And we have an active neighborhood association because it's related to or at the core of or an active organization that exists within that area. But we don't know what Pine Hills is
So larger
because it's so large, and what is our obligation based on the funding source, and or was it a partnership with the neighborhood association?
So
What's the obligation
I mean,
that we have?
the way that we have it termed within the historic preservation plan as Pine Hills comes from that original tract
Okay,
from 1888.
Yeah.
Logan.
But I think over time it's just kind of grown roots and it's expanded, and people who maybe not necessarily their properties were in that original tract, maybe adjacent or close to, I think it's just kind of encompassed this larger area and has just grown. But like, you know, within Pine Hills, as it's been identified, there's Winchester Gables, there's Winchester Villas, there are these other smaller, development tracts, enclaves that have very different names from Pine Hills. So I think it's just kind of expanded. People have just picked up the terminology of Pine Hills and say, yes, I live within Pine Hills. And then the neighborhood association kind of has a larger reach outside of just what that original Pine Hills tract was.
So I guess the last question to that is there an obligation to return to and have as a starting point that subdivision, or as you and or with us sort through the priorities there?
I mean, I think, as we go forward, I think as more research comes out of this, if we are able to define kind of developer or architect, groupings of structures, you can definitely pick up on those, whatever those nomenclatures are for that specific area. When I was in Houston, we had the Greater Houston Heights National Register Historic District. And then within that, there was Houston Heights East, West, and South. Now, those had just been kind of identified as those particular correctional areas to kind of break down the different districts. I mean, something like that could happen, but I think if we know the Winchester Gables Historic District, if we went for a grant, we could specifically call that out as that, this is an intensive level survey for that area, and that's going to be.
That's the easiest one.
When we go, it is, but we could also go for, the the rusticated concrete block district or whatnot.
Right.
Because we have one specific typology of building, we can use that as, unless we identify a particular architect or developer.
So in the what next question then, you folks, I assume, are close to finishing you have finished your deliverable and your work is done. What happens kind of within in your shop and then within the city, and kind of over what time frame?
So I think, what happens next is that we can take this document, which can now be the basis for us to go to the State Historic Preservation Office and request additional certified local government funds to be able to do additional, bring on a consultant to do additional research and survey work for preparation for nominations. We definitely have to sit down now that we have this and identify our next steps of being able to clearly identify, do we want to follow through and maybe do a couple of the intensive level surveys that are called out? Do we want to do more research on pageable area, or the thematic survey work for different architectural styles that have been called out, or building typologies that have been called out? So we definitely need to sit down and identify how we're going to move forward with the document.
So is the funding for those next steps probably, is it CLG, Certified Local Government? And I don't know the answer to, is that on a rolling cycle, or is it go with the July CFA?
So it's,
because the nominations go there.
This year, the application, we were uncertain as to whether or not the applications were going to be opening up for this year.
Which applications?
For certified local government. Okay. Which is funded through the federal level for the Historic Preservation Fund. It closed out at the end of October. So our budget was kind of already set for the city. So we are waiting, and we will do, if we do certified local government funds, we will do them for the next round, which will either open up maybe in the spring or again next fall. So things are uncertain, up in the air, I feel at all times now. But we have always applied for, and we will continue to apply for funds. And there now, it was, the funds were good for a year from October through the end of September, and now it's a 2-year period for the funds. And you can apply every year for different projects and programs.
So the preparation of the nominations, is that, yes, it can be funded through CLG, but can't it also be funded through the CFA? Do you know? I think when I see those every year, do you know?
I don't know that they can anymore.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay, because that's a different schedule, that's really my.
Right, and for survey work, we can also apply for the Preservation League funds that,
Right,
those are available for survey,
right.
survey work. And also, we haven't applied in a very long time, but the National Trust for Historic Preservation also has funds available, but they are for New York. We really have only like 1 or 2 pools that are very competitive to pull from, so
Okay.
it is a little bit difficult. And then we can also budget, and which is what we've done previously, which is what we did for the warehouse district. We didn't apply because we had Delaware Avenue and Pine Hills both at the same time. We didn't use grant funding for the warehouse district nomination.
So it'll be an active conversation through the first half of next year.
Yes. Yeah. We
Check.
got a lot of there was a lot of survey work done in like the 80s and a very long period with nothing. So we have a lot of survey work to catch up on and do. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation, and we look forward to the next steps. Thank you. Further development, understanding of what this all means.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for all of your time this evening. And it's always a pleasure to work in Albany. And Erin and Christopher, thank you so much again for all of your help throughout this process.
Thank you both. Appreciate
There's a lot
it.
more of the Pine Hills to look at in detail.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we'll look forward to any future questions that you may have.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hello.
So do we have to vote on something?
We do not for that. I mean, we
Oh, okay.
will now go into the hearing, but for that, it was just an informational meeting.
Oh,
for
okay.
you to know what was going on.
All right.
Now we're in the public hearing phase of our agenda. And the first item is 521 Warren Street, formerly 133 South Lake Avenue, in the South Lake Avenue Historic District. And this is a return visit. I think we're sorting out the design of some doors.
Yes.
Hopefully that resolved everything and you can move
I
forward.
think the windows were, Danny Sanders representing the owner. John had to leave. So as far as the presentation, I believe it's restricted to the carriage house door.
Correct.
And you have the plan as well to reflect the revised entry design. So we came up with, kept ourselves busy with 6 options, I think we ended up with. So really functionally, the actual door leaf is sort of masked in the design, in the exterior, in that the hinges and everything will be on the inside. So you won't see them, so it'll appear like a monolithic element as far as a door is concerned. And the designs are, a range of styles that we saw from other samples of carriage house or larger garage doors from a company, and there wasn't really a lot of historic context to mimic or anything in the area. So these these are the designs that we came up with that we feel, whichever one is preferred. The center section is the frame. And if you want to go to the plan, maybe first, if we could. It's part of the front. I can ask for both, but it's not. But it's
We only, the elevations,
okay.
are in the presentation, but we don't have the floor plans in the presentation.
Well, part of it is that we, I don't have the plan with me. There's no real need for a transom or glass in that, because that would, it's still going into the units themselves. We've eliminated the vestibule.
Oh, so that was a big part of the previous discussion of getting light into the
Right.
vestibule.
Right, there is no vestibule.
So what happens, which door is operable, on the left or the right?
Both doors from
They're
the
both
center
operable.
are operable, yes.
And they go each into a
separate
Go
unit?
into two apartments.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they swing essentially into the
Mhm.
center section of each.
So the center element that you have, the center vertical element is the partition.
Correct.
Basically, it's the end of the partition that forms the two
But-
entry areas.
And we masked it differently on other samples, but that's
Mhm.
correct. So you go through, and we've reviewed, those are just panels, so that's not glazing. In B. C, they're just all verticals without the decorative. But that reflects the hinge, of course, the dash lines. D is just a trim a little bit different than A. And I think you have two more. Again, the trim is different between C and E. And it's just a little bit more elaborate on F. Personally, not my favorite, but that's just me.
Is the, on option C?
Yeah.
Is that lighting those are just panels or
Those are just
they're
panels.
just panels? Okay. Well, I'll start the conversation, which I think the simpler the better. And I don't think the diagonal faux, it may or may not be faux, but the diagonal framing as if it was a barn doesn't help us here. So that gets us to option, not option A, that gives, not option B.
Depends what trim is, D or E.
Yeah. Option C is kind of a construct, which if it's not glazing, like, I don't know that it does,
Right,
it doesn't do anything for me.
I agree.
So option D, no. So then we kind of have option E because it's simple. And I guess,
Those are those C and E are the only
C
ones
are-
without the cross bracing.
right.
And C has the panel detail,
I
and
like the fact that E,
E, no panel detail.
it takes the line of the windows and connects with the top of the doors in that one little piece of
I
it.
agree with that.
You know, it is colonial revival, and you kind of make it simple and symmetrical, and those kinds of factors go in there. And you try not to overly complicate it.
Can I make a motion, John?
Yeah, I think option E is probably the preferred option, but
Yeah.
since, option C would have had merit if those were actually brought light into those entry areas, but since they're panels, they really don't make a whole lot of sense in the
I would agree.
context of the doors. So, but please, go ahead and make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept option E.
Second,
Okay. Any comments on the commission? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the motion is carried.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Thanks
thank
for
you
your,
for your
we came to a
patience
good
in
conclusion.
struggling with this. And,
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
we finally got through it.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is 179 Elm Street in the Center Square Hudson Park Historic District, and it's the cladding or disguising of a deteriorated CMU wall. Care to explain the path forward here?
The initial meeting here, so I'm Michael Lambert, builder's gonna be doing some work on there. The initial meeting here, we looked at the block wall, how it was, part of it was hidden by row houses that are, whatever you call them beforehand. But this wall needs to be rebuilt, resurfaced, something. So we had proposed a metal panel that didn't look too great. These are fiber cement panels. Got a nice little trim put on the corner there, do them in a running bond pattern. We dig out next to the house there, do a proper base flashing down along the foundation and put them in place. But this would be the pattern, and it would just repeat running bond pattern all the way down the wall. A little stretched out to be the proper running bond, I think, but it's staggered joints centered right in the middle of the other panel. It's gray, it's fiber cement. It's got the same pattern as the block wall had, it's just a little bit larger.
Bigger scale.
Yeah.
Are you all pleased with it as a kind of buildable from a constructability and
I've done
aesthetic
this.
standpoint?
Yeah, we've done this on college facade. I can't think of the name of the other college we put it on, but it was right here in Albany. They put up a new building. We put this on there. The fiber cement siding is fantastic. It's great stuff. Hope it holds up well to graffiti. He's gonna have some of that. He gets that there all the time.
179.
Got a nice little metal trim on the front, so that that gap behind there, the metal trim is on there. It's a little very dark gray. I can get that in. I'm probably gonna get it in a lot lighter gray color to match the fiber cement. So it'll be a very light gray instead of that dark gray. Chris, did you get the other pictures there zooming in on the front corner there to see them?
Yeah, we have that.
Yeah.
How did we leave the, was the discussions around the concrete block, which Aaron Tobin kind of led some of those. How did we leave the conversation? I know that the possibility of this as a solution was one, but were we done with the previous part of our conversations?
Yeah, let me pull up 1 second. This was the main focus of the return.
I think we had discussed and said it would be very cost prohibitive to tear the whole thing down and rebuild all the walls. Because the block is in pretty poor shape. We're gonna remove and replace 40 or 50 block. We're gonna
I remember
resurface a
that part
bunch
of
of
the
the area.
conversation.
Yeah, so you guys had discussed the plan to replace some of the deteriorated CMU wall, and then the discussion to, at the time, install architectural siding. You voted to defer, requested that the applicant should consider cladding the wall in cementitious panels, that the applicant should provide some form of a rendering, and then he was able to do this mock-up. But the discussion of the actual need to do the section replacement of the wall seemed to kind of have concluded with you guys.
Okay.
But you had deferred everything to this meeting.
Okay.
I think the goal was to have a more monolithic appearance to it, because trying to put, a clapboard siding or hardy board siding on it didn't make sense, since it was never an exposed wall and never intended to be exposed. So this is probably the next best thing to rebuilding the block wall in its original form. Probably a better looking more durable solution.
You'd also mentioned that the coping at the top of the wall, it only goes back a certain distance. We figured that's where the other houses were. So there was no coping at the top of the wall in that section. It does start up again at the back of the garage, go around the corner. I would remove some from around the back and bring it over so that this whole side had that
very nice.
camelback clay coping along the top.
Very
And
nice.
we would adjust
Okay.
that. So that would match.
That's great.
It would be a continuous look right down the entire side.
Would you flip back to the slide that shows us that coping? That'll look very nice, I think. With, yeah. That's great. Are you studying, John, or can I make a motion?
No, you can make a motion. Looks like the terracotta coping. You're going to slide that out so it overlaps the new siding.
We're just gonna shift it out a little bit. I can make it up on the inside with the rubber membrane coming up and over.
Okay.
Right, that's what it is.
No, I think it looks fine.
Great, so I'll make a motion that we approve the material as proposed, I don't remember how it's described, the cementitious board, which includes the relocating of the salvage coping to this elevation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
The motion is passed. I should ask anyone opposed, so now it's passed.
Jeff, you were a yes, right?
Yeah, he did say yes.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What'd you do to your arm?
Rotator cuff surgery?
I had, it's completely detached the supraspinatus up here.
Oh my God, same. That's what
Well, just to put those blocks up.
Do you have screws? Do you have screws?
Yeah, they put screws in to hold the stitches, to hold the muscle all the way over there so it heals. And I'm hoping I didn't rip it out, because then my grandson was over and he made a noise and I jumped right up off. I was asleep on the couch.
Oh, no.
I jumped right up and it's been hurting a little bit differently ever since then.
Oh.
Good luck.
But he was fine. So
Those kids, it's all about them all the time.
You guys promised donuts next time, right? You said donuts, but still no donuts.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Where's the donuts, Aaron?
Sorry. I forgot the leftover Halloween candy too, like it really. Yeah.
So that back elevation there, it's in a backyard. I don't, if you think it's appropriate.
No, I didn't know if you needed more. I didn't know if any of it was damaged, just the parts where it had smashed, so if you needed more, there was.
You won't ask for your medical update.
There's some missing that was just never.
My bag is really gonna bother.
The next item is 540 Broadway in the downtown historic district, and looking at two new internally illuminated signs.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just like, some of these look so much better on my computer than they did on the projection. Yeah, so the applicant is Darren Katz with Saxton Signs on behalf of NICEDEC. They're proposing to install two 2 identical signs on the northeastern corner of the property. One will be on the Steuben Street side and one will be on the Broadway side. Both signs are internally illuminated channel letters mounted on a raceway. Signs will have white cans for the letters, logoing with blue trim caps, perforated vinyl for the coloring, and then the raceway will be color matched the existing brick. The signs are mounted by through bolting through the raceways, and will then be the sign will then be mounted to the raceway. And then the reason it's primarily here before the commission is because planning staff's recommendation is consideration be given to the proposed installation of the sign above the 3rd-story window. And that the sign proposal is 2 stories above what code allows and would be considered irregular in the district. Signage is typically located within the 1st-story freezer lintel of the 19th and 20th century commercial storefronts. Code also encourages minimizing visual clutter along the streetscape. So with all that in mind, planning staff recommends relocating the signage 1 story lower to allow for a higher signage on what is a non-contributing structure in the district, which will reduce visual street clutter and better conform to the character of the traditional sign placement of 19th and 20th century storefronts in the district.
We don't have a rendering that shows that. The rendering that's available to us is as proposed.
Yeah.
Correct. So what is presented this evening is what Darren is requesting approval for.
And what's recommended is to move it down 1 level, so that it's
So it would be here.
over that opening or that void.
Over the kind of expanded 2-story entry. Yeah.
Right.
And how do you feel about that? Does that work for you?
So the few issues that are of concern on us is the inhabited floor of NICETEC is the 3rd floor, not the 2nd floor. So one of the reasons they want visibility of where they are actually located. Second is the fear that if the tenant on the 2nd floor ever decides that they want a sign, it is their premises, and then that would put NICETEC in a situation of which they might have to give up rights, spend additional monies on removing and replacing and going through the process again. And ordinance is the 1st floor, so even putting it on that 2nd floor overhang is still not the 1st floor. And in consideration, they did consider putting it down at street level 1st floor, but I know there was concern about, again, tenants having right to, if somebody moved in on the 1st floor, having right to 1st floor facade. And there is, just to note, that is not that out of character. On the top level of the building, we do have a set of channel letters for the attorneys couch white.
What are the 2 streets?
Steuben and Broadway. This is Broadway. Steuben.
Oh, yeah, I know that building.
Could you go back to the first slide that we had? I was a little confused, but yeah, that was good. So these are lit letters. They're lit letters, so very visible. The concern I hear, and I certainly hear the concern around a 2nd floor tenant and some of that complication. A couple questions. One is do we need the logo? I mean, if our goal is to minimize visual clutter, and given the concern that was raised about a potential 2nd floor tenant, would it be acceptable to the commissioners and of course then to the owner to have the lettering as proposed at that level, but to eliminate the white and the yellow logo?
That's a good idea.
It could be placed as a condition. But I mean, it's up to you as a commission as approving the certificate of appropriateness. If you can approve as is, you could always defer and request them come back, or approve the condition that the logo be removed.
And that would also permit, I don't think we'd have any concern with whether the NYSTEC letters stayed to the right or were centered above that vertical mullion. I don't, that would be up to the owner or where the electrical or something like that might be. You can't speak for the owner.
I mean, within reason. I mean, the one thing I will say as a person with a marketing degree and have been in the sign industry for a very long time, branding is branding. I mean, I know this is not McDonald's, but you'd have a hard time asking McDonald's to lose the Golden Arches.
But sometimes sometimes they do.
Sometimes they do, I understand, but
What is
continuity is extremely important.
what is NISTEC?
It is the testing, New York State Education Testing Center for teachers. Sorry, I forgot the most important word there.
I think the Canal Corporation is in that building.
Isn't the Technology Enterprise Corporation?
I thought it was a teachers testing, like, you may be right, it's not,
Yeah, one of my good friends works there. I think they do health
I'll go
insurance.
with you.
data
I
transfer to
was in the
state.
impression that it was the teachers testing.
Well, I'm going to suggest, based on this confusion, that the icon branding is probably not.
It's needed even more.
Perhaps.
It's interesting that not one person here knew what the initials were for
Yeah.
in terms of advertising. So. Maybe I could even see accepting the symbol there, except I don't think that tells you what that is.
No.
I don't see where they're getting a lot of value out of either the symbol or the letters.
And kind of provides a little interest to it.
It's tough to get interest in it without something.
Yeah. How many other tenants are in the building? I'm just wondering, is there going to be a proliferation of signs on the building identifying tenants?
From my knowledge, I know Couch White, I believe, has at least the top two, if not three floors. I believe NISTEC has the third floor. I know there's a dentist on the first floor. I know there's entrances for, I always assumed they were private use apartment type things, but I'm not certain. Other than that, I do not know. This is not my project, I'm just representing. I have, Couch White was my project, I did do that, so I am familiar with the building in the area.
So as far as I'm aware, there's also I was just pulling up because I want to make sure I have their names right. There's a Foresight Marketing. There is Schuler Center for Analysis and Advocacy, and then the Public Integrity Commission.
No New York State Canal Corporation, maybe it's in a different building. I thought for sure it was in that. Is that in that building?
They're on Broadway someplace, but
Oh, if we're starting this precedent, going up to the third floor
Yeah.
for a tenant who happens to be
30
a
South
landlord.
Pearl Street, looks like the address.
And then,
Oh,
does
okay,
that mean
thank
we
you.
set precedent?
Oh, okay,
that
South Pearl,
Every,
yeah, that does make sense.
every
I think it has a similar,
voting area,
like, front there.
everybody's gonna get one.
I feel, I was so focused on that as if it was a 3-story building that it took me a little while to get to recognizing, based on your comment, Jen, is, oh my gosh, how many signs are we gonna have here?
Right.
And don't we really need an overall plan for how any signs would be introduced on both elevations? Because we don't want sign. And the precedence, of course, is.
This is the
concern.
only one that is the owner, right? Do they own the building?
no, they're just
No.
a tenant within the building.
They're just one more tenant.
Yeah.
So we'd be setting a precedent that one tenant is going to have a right to put one, but we won't do any more. Is that fair to the other tenants, or?
Oh, yeah.
What precedent are we establishing? Are we saying, yeah, this is fine, and then someone says, you already approved a third floor sign, and I'm a tenant too.
And
the
a
next
second
one's
floor, and a
tenant,
fourth
the
floor,
next
and a
one.
fifth floor.
No, right now we're dealing with altitude.
But long-term,
One reason we're treating this as an exception, because of that open space that would force things up. Normally, we wouldn't go that high at all.
but still, in terms of, I understand that, but
Yeah.
still in terms of precedence, you could have sign. We could have a dozen signs on the building proposed to us.
Yep.
And or more. And that's,
I would add for that, they'd probably also need to get other variances for that many signs on a building, I would have to assume. But maybe
I'd have to go back and reread, I haven't read it recently, but this sign code portion of the USCO. Because I know that there were stipulations prior to the revision to that portion of the code where there's multiple tenants. They were allowed signs at like the storefronts, kind of, you were looking at like Westgate Plaza, each storefront could have their own individual sign that could be no more than, I think it was like 10 square feet. So I'd have to go back and revisit what the code says specifically for like multi-tenant structures.
I'd like to propose that we table this till we have good elevation drawings or other information to understand what we might potentially be talking about. And have it in the context of the sign ordinance.
Who owns the building?
What is on file is Albany Ventures Incorporated. Their billing address is in Schenectady.
What do you say makes sense? Is that a motion? I don't think so.
Oh, if we were to table this, we need a motion to table it?
Yes.
I would just say, your point is definitely valid. But historically, if you look throughout downtown, in your own experience, my own experience, generally retail and food type businesses are the only businesses that generally have signs on a building unless it is their building.
I don't know, we had some other large signs over by across from the park.
Across from the park?
The new park.
Yeah, Kara has something to say when we're ready.
Yeah.
So
The only other
the certificates of Chris and I had gone through this, the certificates of appropriateness that had come before the Historic Resources Commission for signage above the first floor like sign band was the two contributing historic structures, the old Brown Derby building for
Yes.
Cardona and McGuire
Yes.
law firm.
Yes,
That came in because they were doing them at
That's
a
right.
higher, and
that's right.
that application was revised to like a similar signboard with banding and things like that. That again, they were the sole tenant for that structure. And then the building on the corner of Chapel and Sheridan, that corner structure, like two buildings up from Dawn's Victory. Also another law firm, and they did theirs at a higher, I think above the second floor windows, and again, they were the sole tenant within that structure as well. I think I was not here initially when the application went through, and I know it did come back through for revisions, was the Hampton Inn. I think but that may have been based on the height of the structure and the code requirements.
I think we should be very careful on this. I think that we should look at the sign ordinance, and I'm sorry to make extra work for you guys, but any of the signs that were proposed and approved that are relevant because they are above the first floor, it would be helpful to understand that context. This is a big building with multi-tenants, and I think we would like to see a plan so that it's an orderly approach to the signage that will be added. That was a motion to table.
Second.
Did you get all that, Jason?
Aaron, I believe that the variance question is correct, because I know over by the Quackenbush Garage over by Broadway, I know we've done that. I believe it's 626 Broadway, but like right when you're kind of coming out of Broadway onto 787, there's that office building there that I know that Saxon has put multiple signs on that office building, and I believe a few of them are on the second and third floor. I don't believe that is an historical
I was gonna say, I think
area,
that building,
but I do
is right
believe we had to
outside.
get variances for the additional signs because you're basically allowed the two per side at the 32 square foot.
I mean, it's interesting. It feels like a building of this scale with multiple tenants would almost put the number of the building up large and high, so that if I was looking for the building, I know I'm looking for 520 or
It is
whatever
lettered,
that is.
which a lot of buildings downtown aren't, but it is, I would say, I think it's referred to as Broadway Plaza.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know there's golden plate letters on the first floor off to
They're,
the side of
they're
the
right in
open
front of where that
vestibule.
truck is.
Yep.
Right here.
They're shiny, so it's hard to see it.
Oh,
Right here.
oh, yeah.
But we will definitely go back and we'll take a look at that.
Thank you.
Remember when this was a real hot issue in the 80s when Key Bank wanted to put the big key on top of the bank, and Tom Whalen was losing his mind. I think they used to have a great close friendship between Victor Riley and Tom Whalen, and I don't think it was ever the same.
Well,
The key didn't make it up.
And I know that going through old documents, the Renaissance, I know that was a big deal, and they had to mock up the R, and you all went out and looked at it. The Berkshire Bank building that's on South Pearl Street, just outside the historic district, between downtown and the commercial row. That had to go for variance because they put Berkshire Bank on the roof.
Yeah, let's get this right.
So,
Yeah.
did we?
It's one thing if you're a distance from a highway and you're dealing with it, but this is still a it's not residential, but it's a commercial street, nowhere near of that.
Yeah, Marilyn did make a motion to table, Jen seconded it. So we're just discussion.
Are there any questions, comments?
I just have a quick comment. There actually are a lot of upper floor signs, and I think being consistent is actually really important. As a business owner that wants to move downtown, I would love to also not have our logo nitpicked either. So I get that too, from a branding standpoint. But I think consistency is a big deal. It really is. A lot of businesses are struggling to make it go downtown, and consistency is
On the part of our decision-making.
I think making sure you guys are consistent with everything.
Yeah.
Not that you need another survey, but looking at like how many upper floor signs are there already, because precedence has already been set.
Yep.
Signs have been approved for a while, so just
The motion has been made to table and seconded. I'll call it to a vote. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? It is carried.
So from me, I'm just waiting to hear from what you discover
Mhm.
and to be put back on the agenda. But there's nothing I need to do as far as,
Now, right now, it's on staff and hold on.
so the removal of the logo is a moot point.
At the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other items to come before the commission?
Oh, Chris will email, I'll have Chris email. We have set our dates for 2026.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
2026, so I will circulate those so that you are all aware of moving forward into next year. We'll be back in this room again, so
You'll send those dates out?
we'll send those dates out, we'll circulate them.
It's like we were just setting the dates for 2025.
I know.
Where does the time go?
Time flies.
But that was all I have.
I'll move to adjourn.
Entertain a motion to
Second.
adjourn. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jack? Okay.
So here's a little sign, so here's a little bit of sign more. Is,
You can have those questions.
yeah,
I
Bob
was
tells the
saying-
story of when he moved the bike store across from Dr. Burns, next to Dr. Burns.